Hello and welcome to Newsworm. I'm your host, Chris with the CHRILLCAST, and today this is going to be the second in a series of videos discussing more subjective things. Like last week, we discussed the PlayStation TV, arguably Sony's biggest misstep slash mistake slash failure of the last decade. Today, we're going to be kind of discussing the evolution of wireless technology, mainly how we got from early IR technology to now modern Bluetooth technology in regards to controller communications with the consoles. So, if you like what we're doing here, like this video, comment your thoughts down below, and make sure you guys subscribe. This is not going to be a quick video, so strap in and get whatever drink you want and listen to how this is going to go. So if you guys don't know, one of the earliest forms of wireless controller technology shares a common ground with the modern, not so modern, remote controller you use for your television. These use something that is called IR, infrared. And the reason that your remote only works in one direction, directly at the sensor, is because that's just how IR technology works. It's looking for the infrared wave directly shot at it from the remote, in a simple way of explaining it. Just due to the way the technology works, it's not very reliable for game controls because it doesn't have enough oomph, for lack of a better term that's not going to be too colloquial to electrical engineering. It doesn't have enough power, enough range in its frequency in order to allow for enough controls to be used efficiently with modern controllers. But on the NES, it worked just fine with the NES satellite system, provided that you held your controllers in line of sight with the NES satellite. So that was pretty cool. You could have up to 4 controllers that way. But technically speaking, since Nintendo had always wanted to create a wireless controller ever since the original Famicom, the first controller to actually do it was this one, the Nintendo Gamecube Wavebird. It's a wireless controller, and it used the 2.4 gigahertz wireless radio frequency. That is a standard technology. It's one of the technologies used for Wi-Fi in the US, although at the time that this controller came out, Wi-Fi wasn't exactly widespread yet. So having interference wasn't really a thing yet. And basically, the Wavebird was the only officially released wireless controller from the GameCube generation. That was the same time as the Xbox and the Dreamcast, and of course the PlayStation 2. And the PlayStation 2, for those that don't know, never had an officially licensed Sony produced PlayStation 2 wireless controller. That would come later with the PS3. And the original Xbox, same story. There were some third-party companies that released wireless Xbox controllers, but the first officially released Xbox controller that was wireless was with the Xbox 360, which we'll get to later. So, yeah, Nintendo takes the crown for having the first 2.4 gigahertz controller. That is the Wavebird. One of my favorite controllers. Honestly, I still use this controller all the time. It's extremely reliable. I think it's got like 8 channels. Let's see, 1, 2. More than, wow, it might have 16. Yeah, 16 channels. So you could have, allegedly, in one room, 16 different GameCube controllers hooked up to 4 different GameCubes. 4 per GameCube, up to 16, and you wouldn't have an issue. That's pretty impressive for the first officially released wireless controller for any console of the big 3. Moving on. So that was the only one officially licensed from the 6th gen of consoles. When we get to the Wii Remote, which I don't have one sitting here. I've got a ton of them though. The Wii Remote continues that trend, except it now uses the less proprietary Bluetooth. I bet you didn't know, and I didn't know either, that the Wii remotes, the Wiimotes, use Bluetooth, which if you didn't know, Bluetooth is a non-proprietary 2.4 gigahertz technology that is used for a lot of devices. Mainly, it's used for short range and low power, and it would maintain the Wiimotes, let them work for a very long time. And since it uses the standard Bluetooth technology, there's nothing proprietary about it. So most anybody could technically create a, provided that they know the protocol of the coding on the Wii, they could technically use that Bluetooth tech and create a third-party controller, which is why you do see a boatload of less than ideal Wiimotes created by third parties, because they figured out how to program for the Wii and create those knockoff controllers. But Bluetooth is just the standard short-range wireless technology standard. It's also 2.4 gigahertz, so it's not different necessarily. It just uses a standardized technology of encoding and decoding the signals and the range based on that Bluetooth band it uses. Okay, so now you know that. The Wiimote was, I think, the first, no, it came out at the same time as the PS3. So technically speaking, Sony and Nintendo were essentially ready to use Bluetooth at the same time. But following up from the GameCube's Wavebird, we have the Xbox 360 controller. Now, the Xbox 360 controller was the first wireless Xbox controller, and it uses a proprietary 2.4 gigahertz protocol, which is why you rarely, if ever, see any, at least while this was out, you saw basically no third-party wireless controllers. Almost every third-party controller was a wired USB controller. Up until pretty much this thing was discontinued, I would never see third-party wireless controllers. It wasn't until the 360 was basically done and the Xbox One was already out that we started seeing like legit wireless controllers for the Xbox 360 that were not produced by Microsoft, which was very odd because almost every other console that was out prior to would have tons of knockoffs, and because they were all knockoffs that had wires, well, I mean, the preferred option would be the wireless Xbox 360 controller produced by Microsoft, which means Microsoft sold a lot of controllers. Now, I actually find that the range of the 360 using its proprietary controller is pretty wide range, pretty long distance away that you could use it. I don't remember the exact distance, but I remember walking throughout an entire house and never having an issue disconnecting. It went a pretty long way. Now, I actually do prefer the wired version because no matter how you do it, wireless controllers always have just that little bit of lag behind a wired controller, which is why people prefer those. The DualShock 3, which released, I don't remember if the Wii released first or the PS3 released first, but technically speaking, the Wii and the PS3 were the first to use the standard Bluetooth. And I've got one of those sitting right here. The Sony DualShock 3. These controllers are pretty nice. They're kind of small. They use the Bluetooth technology. They sync by connecting your controller cable directly to the PS3, so they didn't quite have the syncing feature down yet. There's a pain in the butt to implement that. But it uses a USB mini B port, which is kind of an odd cable nowadays because all you see is micro USB and USB-C. This is USB mini, which is a B port. And try to find one of those cables anywhere in the bargain bin. You won't find it at the store. You pretty much have to order it to get one. But yeah, and if you don't remember, the DualShock 3 originally released as the 6-axis controller. That was due to some kind of a legal battle with Bluetooth and vibrations, and yeah, Sony ended up bending to the will of the consumer and adding back the rumble feature that they removed to avoid the legal dispute with immersion technology in 2007. Talk about a ridiculous series of events. Introduce DualShock 2. Remove vibrations for DualShock 3. Add them back in after legal battle's over. Sony just couldn't win. I mean, the PS3 was one of the worst selling consoles of the 7th gen, but it ended up making a comeback right at the end and surpassing the 360. So it ended up being second place behind the Wii, which is bizarre. But Bluetooth, DualShock 3. And I find these to be very reliable controllers, the DualShock 3s. I've had them since they first dropped, the DualShock. And I've never had any of their batteries ever die on me. I mean, other people have this different experiences than me, but I find these to be pretty reliable. Next on the chopping block, after we finish the 7th gen, we have a really interesting set of consoles. Namely, the first one would be the Wii U. And this one's kind of a very different technology when you think about it. So the Wii U gamepad. Sorry, it's a little smudged up, but the Wii U gamepad is probably the strangest controller that anybody's ever released. Let's be honest. I've never seen a controller like this prior to the Wii U. And this is an even weirder wireless, because this is basically using straight up Wi-Fi. I think it's a 5 gigahertz. I could be wrong, but I think it's a 5 gigahertz radio in here. And that allows for very short range, but very high density data. So you can literally stream the screen from the Wii U base station to the Wii U gamepad, which is why you can get the image directly to it and you can do off-screen play. It also has, in this corner right here, NFC, which is why you can scan your amiibos using the using the little patch there, the NFC right there, the amiibo reader. That's NFC. NFC is near field communication, and it's basically two coils coming together and sharing data at very short range, inches to maybe a foot at most apart, but usually within inches of each other. And those amiibos basically have a set of data and a coil in them that allow the Wii U gamepad to essentially power with the coil inside of it and then read the data. That's the easy, light version of how NFC works. And then I don't know what this Celica thing is. Let me see. Oh, RFID. Okay, so that's basically the same thing as NFC. That's basically how it validates that your amiibo is legit. And then the funny thing about the Wii U gamepad is, because it has an infrared inside of it, it can dual. Where did I put that remote at? It can dual as your remote because it's got the infrared, which is why you can control your TV with the Wii U gamepad, because it's got the infrared sensor right there. That little black thing right there, that glass plastic looking thing right there, that's where the infrared's at. That's how you can control your TV with the Wii U gamepad, similar to how the Samsung Galaxies used to have that same tech. So the Wii U gamepad has like the most amount of wireless technologies in it of any controller I've ever seen. But it is kind of an oddball, and most people look at this thing and they're like, what were you thinking, Nintendo? But the Wii U is still one of my favorite consoles, so besides that fact, it's pretty awesome. Moving on, I mean, we also have the Wii U Pro controller, which uses a less proprietary Bluetooth. Nintendo is back to Bluetooth after the Wii U gamepad launched Wii U Pro controller. It would tick on from the Wiimote, and the Wiimotes worked on the Wii U too, which is probably why Bluetooth was already on board for the Wii U Pro controller. But this is probably the absolute best in regards to battery life controller I've ever seen. And you could pick this thing up months after you last charged it, like many months, and this thing will not be dead. I've heard of people who have never charged this controller except for the first time they used it, and it's not for lack of use, it's just because this controller has like the most efficient standby battery usage of any controller I've ever seen. The only oddball thing about this controller is that both the sticks are up top, probably to match the Wii U gamepad. But yeah, this is a really good controller, and because Bluetooth is a very low energy battery manager, power user, very low energy in the power use, it does last a very, very long time. Okay. Now we're on to the Xbox One, and this is kind of an interesting one. I have to talk about this one a little bit longer than normal than the other Xbox. The Xbox 360 had proprietary 2.4 gigahertz, and actually, believe it or not, the Xbox One launched the same way. The Xbox One, if you have one of these controllers with the glass plastic see-through stuff on top, that's a 2.4 gigahertz controller. It is not Bluetooth, which is why when they originally released the Xbox One controller, if you wanted to use it on your PC, you needed the proprietary Xbox wireless adapter for PC, because this is not compatible with PC except if it's wired. If it's wired, then it's compatible with PC. And this right here works with every Xbox One and Xbox Series X. It still works just fine. They've continued to carry this proprietary backwards compatibility across their consoles going forward. But eventually Microsoft wised up and said, all right, we'll just use Bluetooth. And if you have any of these ones that have just the straight up matte top finish, and I think some of the white ones with the Xbox One S also use Bluetooth, but for sure, if you have one of these with the just the matte black top or the matte finish on top instead of that see-through plastic, then you know you've got one of the Bluetooth controllers and you're good to go. These ones can be used with phones, with computers, with Bluetooth on board. Good to go. This one, don't even try to pair this with anything other than an Xbox console unless you got the wireless adapter. But yeah, same generation, and Microsoft flip-flop between Bluetooth and proprietary 2.4 gigahertz technology. Kind of funny how Microsoft held on to that proprietary tech for the longest possible time they could. But throughout the Xbox One and Xbox Series S console, Xbox Series consoles, they went from the wireless technology they started with to the Bluetooth 4.0 to the Bluetooth low energy. And we also had the wired controllers. Like, one of my absolute favorite controllers from that generation is the revision of the Duke, the wireless controller. And like I've always said, a good wireless controller will always be faster than a good wireless controller. So I always prefer that. But yeah, Microsoft finally bit the bullet and went to the standard Bluetooth with that generation. Sony played it safe, and they stuck to Bluetooth with the DualShock 4. This guy right here. But they did change significantly from the previous gen. Where did I set that? Where did I set my... There it is. You can see they have a pretty significant profile difference between the DualShock 3 and the DualShock 4. But they're both using the same technology. This uses Bluetooth, and this uses Bluetooth. Which is why, when the DualShock 4 came out, you could technically pair a DualShock 4 up with a PS3. Although it lacked some very strange features if you did that. And now the DualShock 4 is technically compatible with the PS5, but really only for PS4 games. Kind of dumb, Sony, but that's what you get for buying Sony products. You get a lack of forward thinking when it comes to consumer friendliness. But yeah, this uses the same technology. It's got the Bluetooth, just like the DualShock 3. And the battery life on these, I mean, honestly, comparably, these are not very good on battery life. Sony's never really produced a controller with good battery life. But if you're not playing for hours on end, plug it back into the charger when you're done, you're never going to run out of battery unless, you know, like I said, you got a 5 to 10 hour gameplay session going on. Yeah, you're probably going to die with the controller. You get another one out. But pretty much every person I know that owns a Sony console has multiple controllers, even if it's just for one person. So don't know what that says about Sony and their controller production, but I can honestly say I've always had multiple controllers for any Sony console that I've owned. So there you go. But Bluetooth across the board. We got Bluetooth, Bluetooth, Bluetooth so far for Sony. Really, Nintendo's been the oddball with the Wii U gamepad. But then going forward, next gen, so you get the Joy-Cons. probably it's a strange departure. I mean, Nintendo seems to change their controllers up significantly every single console generation. But yeah, Bluetooth, and they carried over the NFC connection specifically for Amiibos, which is pretty cool. Bluetooth 3.0. I personally don't like Joy-Cons. I think they're kind of garbage controllers. I've never had a good experience with them necessarily, so I always buy something different. Like I got the Pro controller, which is sitting behind my monitor over here, and I've got the Hori Split Pad Pro instead of the Joy-Cons. But yeah, these use Bluetooth just like the previous gen, and for the most part, I've never had any connection issues with these at all. Get to the Pro controller. This is basically a modified, upgraded Wii U Pro controller with less battery life, but it has NFC, so you don't have to bother whipping out the Wii U gamepad, unlike the Wii U Pro controller, which did not have NFC built in. And it's got HD rumble, which does make a difference in battery life when you're using a more controlled, more specific rumble. It takes a more specific signal to control that, a higher powered, more dense signal. Then you get the DualSense. It uses Bluetooth 5.1. It's a pretty new Bluetooth technology. And then, okay, so it's got the headphone jack, so that's all that's on us. So yeah, Bluetooth 5.1. That's the latest and greatest of Bluetooth that we know of. It's really high-tech stuff. And then Xbox they stuck with what they have. So what's been kind of the biggest leap in technology and controllers? Well, I think probably one of the coolest things I've seen, and this is more of a retro gamers thing, but one of the coolest things I have seen lately as far as wireless controller technology goes is the ability to make your old systems with Bluetooth, like LE, the low energy Bluetooth solutions. You can take an 8BitDo DIY kit, put it inside of your NES controller, and pair it with a Bluetooth adapter also produced by 8BitDo, BitDo, whatever their name is, and boom, I have a wireless NES controller that's not infrared, and it works every time, and it works well. And I love it. I personally like having this new range with no wires on old school consoles is amazing. They've done it with the NES, they did it with the SNES, and they've got the DIY kits for all these things. Here, I'll show you guys. Adding Bluetooth to old controllers is probably one of the coolest things I've ever seen. And with the evolution of Bluetooth, we now have the ability to use batteries and low power devices for transmitter and receivers. Oops, need to go back here. Now, just keep in mind, if you do order one of these DIY kits, they're really easy to install, but they take months. I ordered mine in either early March or late February, and it showed up in late April. But yeah, they've got these kits. I think they're about 20 bucks a piece, about $5 shipping. Not bad. Not bad at all. Let's see, mod kits, there you go. But you have to order them direct from 8BitDo. You got one for the original Dogbone controller, PlayStation Classic controller, the original PlayStation controller. The mod kit is for the Sega Saturn, the Mega Drive controller, that's the Genesis, Super Nintendo / Super Famicom Classic Edition, the NES Classic Edition, the original NES controller. That's the kit that I installed. That was a really good kit, by the way. It worked great. And then they've got it for the original SNES. This is actually the official 8BitDo controller prior to them getting, I don't know if it was legal threats or what, but they ended up shutting this one down. But this is the 8BitDo gamepad that they sold before they did these DIY kits. And I have to say, the quality is there. It's a good controller. But yeah, that's kind of a history of wireless technology and controllers in the gaming industry. I know a lot of you probably still use wired controllers. I know I do quite a bit. Saves on batteries, saves on a lot of things, you know, input lag. But, I mean, these have really changed the way that I play retro. And I got in on wireless right in the beginning. This was my original GameCube controller from back in the day. Wireless is awesome. What can I say? Anyways, comment your thoughts. What was your first wireless controller you ever owned? Do you still use wireless, or do you stick to wired controllers? Like, got yourself a Duke like I did? And let me know what you guys think. Do you like these style of videos? Is this an interesting discussion to listen to? Might start posting a podcast version of this at some point in the near future, like Subject Sunday podcast. I don't know. We'll see. But as always, make sure you guys comment, like, and subscribe. And I will see you all on the next one. Bye, guys.